Welcome to the inaugural episode of Imagineering, the stories behind the Storytellers. My name is Ryan Pustizzi, and I'll be your host for this evening. Tonight, I'm joined by a credible guest. During his time at Imagineering, he served as a concept designer and worked on countless attractions, such as Rapunzel's Lantern Festival and Peter Pan's Neverland Adventure at Tokyo Disney Sea. The Enchanted Tales of Beauty and the Beast, as well as the new Space Mountain at Tokyo Disneyland, and one of my personal favorite attractions, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad, just to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sam Usle. Sam, thanks so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
It's a pleasure. Oh,
Yes,
thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
yeah, so happy. You know, I've known each other for about a year now, so it's really awesome. You're my first interview, first episode of this brand new series. And I'll say, I think one of the things that stood about you is everyone, especially like our viewers, they always say like, "Oh, like I grew up around Disney. Disney was like part of my childhood." And I can say that for myself. At the age of 5, I knew I wanted to someday work in the creative field for Disney. But for you, Disney really was like part of your childhood. You grew up the child of Imagineer, right?
I did. Yeah, I had the coolest take your kid to work days of any kid could dream of.
Yeah. And so, I remember you were telling one time how you grew up part of your life in Japan around Tokyo, because your dad was working on the Tokyo parks at the time. And
Right.
how did that, I mean, let's start there. How did that like kind of affect you and send you down this road to Imagineering, just being immersed in that for such a young age?
Yeah, it's like I said, I had one of the coolest take your kid to work day kind of experiences as a kid, which would usually happen about once a year. About once a year, I would get to go to my dad's work or the even the site and see what he was working on. Which in a case of when I first started really becoming really more conscious of this idea of what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do as a career? You're 6 and 7, you start thinking about these things. People start asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think I had some of the typical answers. I want to be a baseball player. I want to be a fighter pilot or something, a fireman or something like that. But then I think I would also occasionally toss in there, I want to be an architect like my dad, or I want to be a Disney Imagineer like my dad, right? Because I would visit his work or I would visit one of the sites of the projects he was working on. And I would see, a volcano rising out of
Yeah.
Tokyo, Tokyo Bay,
Yeah.
harbor of Tokyo Bay, right? And there'd be a little ride vehicle like popping out of the volcano or,
Oh,
and it's really so that it left such an impression on my mind. Even when I was like 2 years old, my mom would, and they were building the Indiana Jones attraction at Disneyland. My mom would take me on the monorail past the ride building because the ride building for Indiana Jones sits on the exterior of the park.
yeah, they got all
Right.
the no CM green and the faux facade around the
Yeah,
train
yeah,
my entrance.
the go away green, right?
Yes.
And which is it doesn't
It
quite hide
sometimes
the
works.
building, but at that time it was still all open. They hadn't closed it in yet, and so my dad would come out to the edge of the building with a big sign saying "Hi, Sam," and my mom would take me on the monorail, and I'd wave at my dad from the monorail. So that it can't help but leave an impression, I think, on a kid. I'd be shocked if I'm so incredibly fortunate in that way that I just grew up in this environment. But my dad would also he would show me the more serious side of it too. He would bring home his working drawings, his CDs, and he would slam those on the table, and pop open some pages, and he would sit there review, because he'd be redlining drawings late in Japan,
Yeah.
right? But he would invite me to come over and sit and actually take a look. He would never shoo me away from the work. He would never say, "Oh, this isn't for you." He'd say, "Hey, Sam, why don't you come over here and take a look at this?" And he'd say, "Do you see anything wrong with this drawing?" And I'm told that I would actually occasionally have a good observation and say something like, "Oh yeah, there's a column in the ride track," or something, and he'd say, "That's right," and big circle, right? We can't have that. It's in the ride envelope. I'm very just so very fortunate in that way that I had that kind of exposure um, to that world, and so Japan especially was really
Oh,
um, formative because we would go to the parks, but then I would also see the park. We would see Tokyo Disney Sea crossing on the other side of the berm, right? And my mom told me, "Oh, that's where your dad's working over there." And then we did occasionally get site visits as it was going up, going
oh,
vertical. And of course, there's still at that time there's a lot of dirt and there's trucks going by, and it's kind of hard to fully piece together all the magic that's going to happen. But you start to get an idea.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best
Perfect
theming
era.
Disney's
Yeah.
ever done with that park.
Oh yeah, it's one of the most beautiful land. I think it's the most beautiful landscape.
Yeah, the way it
At
sits on
the
the bay
theme
and
park.
everything, it just
Right.
the
Yeah.
water flowing naturally, so naturally appearing throughout, and the hotel is the main entrance. Just stunning. You
Yeah.
can't beat it.
Absolutely. It's if anyone ever gets, I highly recommend if you ever get a chance to see it.
I'm trying to get out there. Yeah, hopefully sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know it's
it's a
hard.
long flight.
Yeah, it is. It is. But anyway, yeah, it left a really big impression on me. And then by the time I was in, I want to say it was about sixth or seventh grade that I decided, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do with my life. I think at that point, I think I had narrowed it down to something like baseball pitcher, um, fighter pilot, or Disney architect. And I ended up I remember going to my dad in like late sixth grade saying, "Dad, I want to be a Disney Imagineer." And he said, "You're sure you don't you want, I want to be an architect for Disney." He said, "You're sure you don't want to be a doctor
Yeah,
or
everyone
something?"
looks at you crazy when you're young and say, "I want to work for Imagineer for Disney." They give you that little look. It's like,
Yeah.
you sure? Like, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But and I said, no, that's what I want to do. And he said, okay, all right, if that's what you want to do, then I'm going to start you on a drafting board tomorrow. And he did, and he did. He started, he was he would always if he's look he would always say if that's what you want to do, then you got to earn it.
yeah,
You've got to earn it. It requires a certain set of skills. It requires a certain set of knowledge. And he would buy me tons of books. And he was always he wasn't trying to spoil me with stuff. He would try to give me all these books on like artists, Disney artists. Like he'd give me the Herb Ryman books, or
oh,
all the the Disney Mountains books, or anything on
well said. But
any books that he would go to the company store late, and you'd see like any collection of Disney artists, whether in animation or in WDI. He would make sure I had plenty of those to sift through, and so I would lay on my bed sifting through those, right, and getting
yeah,
exposure to that world. And so he would make sure that he would make sure to kind of foster that. um, and so yeah, I was primed more than just about any I think any kid could dream of being, for to be kind of just totally absorbed in that world.
let's say if
uh,
I had died for every Imagineering book I have with this bookshelf, I'd be
well,
ready to take
you're
college
doing
credit.
it you're doing it right. Just
Yeah,
soak those in.
so I'll take it. That growing up around that, starting so early drafting, something that is an invaluable skill in Imagineering. I'm guessing that was kind of the moment where you knew, like, this is it. Like, this, I'm locking in. This is the move for me. I'm gonna make it here one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. Like in sixth grade when I decided, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And from that point forward, I really didn't deviate. Up to that point, I'd kind of waffled between a couple different things, but once I decided that, I knew what I wanted to do. I really didn't deviate, and all my choices via school, education, following that were aimed at that point. Now, it did have, being kind of a young kid and not knowing much. What probably one of the negative parts of that is in my schooling, I decided that I wanted to kind of cut out anything that wasn't related to my future career as a
yeah,
Disney
anything modern,
architect.
anything.
Yeah, so like, oh, spelling, I don't need
Ah,
that, right? Math, who needs that? I just, But then my teachers who at this point all noticed what I wanted to do, because I would always, turn on the back of my homework, I'd always be sketching Disney theme parks or something, or I'd cut up my homework and build little models of the Disney Main Street station on my desk. That's the kind of stuff I would do to keep busy. And so, but I had this great teacher who said, okay, look, you want to build roller coasters? All right, well, here's, learn your trigonometry. See this graph, right? Well, you've got to figure out how much energy there is at the top of this, at the top of this sine wave, right? And then coming down the arc, how much energy is there going to be at the bottom of the hill versus the top? You have to learn this stuff. And I went,
yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah.
Can't believe that. I wish there wasn't any trigger calculus involved in architecture and Imagineering still.
Yeah.
Not my favorite work ever.
Yeah.
So obviously passion from this so young age, getting started on it, focusing on it so hard. You were Imagineering pretty early on in your career, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, if I remember correctly, you told me like right out of high school you got your first internship with them, right?
Yeah, I did. And part of that was because I went to a unique high school, which I chose because I knew I wanted to be a Disney
Yeah.
Imagineer from a young age. So, when I was in eighth grade and I was trying to decide what high school in the LA area I wanted to go to, um, Don Bosco Technical Institute came and gave a really cool did a really cool sizzle reel of all the different things you could do at that particular academy. And the unique thing about that school is sort of a relic of the Cold War era, where they would teach high school students an actual trade or industry and then send them off directly into the industry, right? It was a way to kind of boost our industrial sector during the war. And then even though the Cold War was over, they still had these tech programs that were unique to the kind of St. John Bosco oratory model in Turin, where the idea was you would kind of teach poor kids a trade, give them a tool to provide for themselves, and they could go out into the world and actually, actually make a living.
Yeah.
And so this John Bosco Tech specifically offered, they offered automotive design, where you literally be, as a high school student, taking apart and putting cars back together. They offered construction, where you'd literally be framing houses, framing buildings inside your classroom.
Oh
They
yeah.
offered electronics, where you'd be there in the full, or material science, where you're there in the full goggles and kit, and you're lifting crazy materials out of vats of weird goo, and or you're soldering motherboards together. But they also offered design, which was, a room full of drafting tables, good old school drafting tables,
Oh, you gotta love a good
drafting
drafting table.
machines, and
Well, India Inca Mylar.
yeah, yep, exactly. And the teacher that would come over and wrap my knuckles if my line weights weren't right, that kind of thing. And it was great. It was great.
Very different than my high school.
And
My
so,
high school,
yeah,
you gotta work
sorry,
just to get
go ahead.
a draft art studio class there. There's no drafting classes, unfortunately. But
Right, right, because most high schools these days are designed to feed you into a college, and then the college is where you kind of pick your industry, right? The high school is really about teaching you, these accredited subjects, right?
yeah,
That's not so much how Don Bosco was. I mean, we did that too. We had all the normal subjects any other high school had, but then we also had this whole tech layer,
yeah,
and that's what I really cared about. But because I had that tech layer, I was able to actually, by the time I was graduating high school, I could draft very well, to high degrees of tolerance. I could, and I knew Revit, I knew CAD, I knew SketchUp.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
just like, oh, I had opened up the programs, but I could actually make things in these programs. I could
yeah.
make working drawings, such that I was also fortunate enough during high school to be part of a campus revitalization that was happening during high school, where a former graduate came back and brought a lot of money to the school to offer to update its campus, because its campus hadn't been updated since 1970. So I actually proposed some, using the skills I had learned in the design tech, using, drafting, SketchUp, CAD, and all this stuff. I proposed some designs for different areas of campus, and some of them actually got accepted. Some were actually built.
Wow.
And so going into my high school, and then my high school actually hired me for the summer to actually create more proposals for the campus as well over the summer, and do campus master plan design. So by the time I was coming into that first job at Imagineering, I wasn't just a high school kid who had never picked up a pencil before and who had only ever studied, like, biology, math, science, whatever.
You were like a full fleshed out architect ready to go, basically.
Yeah, I basically had something like the equivalent of a sophomore or junior level of college design
Yeah.
student knowledge of things. And so that and usually companies start hiring interns about that kind of sophomore junior level of college, right?
Yeah.
And so I even though I was younger, I had that skill set. And so that made me actually it made it so that I was actually able to apply to a job at WDI. And it also happened to be really good timing for me, because that was when Shanghai Disneyland was really ramping up.
Oh man,
Shanghai Disneyland was in full production mode.
super
And
lucky time.
yes, yes. And so, for anyone interested in getting hired at a place like WDI, as a general rule, there's a big ramp up in lead of hiring and with a new project, and then usually there's a layoff that comes after that. But it's really, if there's a lot of work coming down the pipe, that's a great time to get in. If you see in the news, hey, they're building one, no, 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 right?
Disneyland Dubai.
Yeah, exactly. That's the time you want to be, looking, because they're going to be ramping up, and if you can just get your foot in the door, that's a
You,
big leap. That's, you're halfway there.
you bring up a great point there. Getting your
Yeah,
foot in the door. in my
Just
conversation with you,
yeah,
one of the biggest things you always harp on is just get your foot in the door,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you get in the door, your talent will speak for itself in time, right? And you may have to teach
yeah,
yourself some things. You may not fully quit, but you adapt. You never say no to a
yeah.
project. That's one of the biggest things you've always talked to me about,
Correct.
right? I mean,
Yes, and there's definitely a whole. I can talk about what you do once your foot is in the door, but getting that foot in the door, that's the hard. That's actually probably the initially the hardest thing, is because Dave Durham once told me he said, look, I've got a stack of papers on my desk about this tall of people who want to do this job, and they're all qualified. They're all incredible people, and I have to sift between that stack this tall and choose between the most minutia of things to pick one or two roles, right? That's the kind of competition you're looking at. And to the point where he'd say, he would actually tell the famous thing he would tell a lot of us. He said, people would kill for your job. Like people
yeah,
would kill for your job. I want you to not to be morbid, but that was a
hey,
piece of
I've dreamed of working there for 13 years now, you know?
right. Yeah, it's so exactly, and so that's you should just you just need to appreciate that. And so I think some people as well they get a little bit down when they apply and they can't find a way in. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, and tons of qualified people don't get in the door. So don't beat yourself up too much. Multiple factors have to all line up to make it work, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And you can also, so what you have to do is kind of prepare yourself to be, when if the stars align, be about as ready as you can be, right? And so for me, the stars were fortunate enough to align that I found that point where they were ramping up like crazy for that park. I knew just they weren't actually looking for, and uniquely too, at that point in time, they weren't actually looking for an architect.
Oh,
They were just looking for somebody who could go into CAD and calculate what they call area takeoffs of materials in the back of house of Shanghai Disneyland. In other words, they wanted somebody to count how much square footage of acoustic ceiling tile there was
oh,
in all the
not anything
offices.
glorious.
Nothing glorious about it. But you know what? I
You
could
got
do it.
your foot in the door.
I knew CAD. I was a high school, so like, look, you can pay me minimum wage
I'll do
to
it for free.
I'll
Like,
do it. I'll do it for. Oh, heck, I'll do it for free. Exactly. You can pay me minimum wage, and I can come in and I can do your area takeoffs. But because I had that portfolio at that point, I actually had an architectural portfolio late in high school, and so they could say, okay, here's a high school kid who I can pay minimum wage, who also has an architectural portfolio, knows CAD. Of course, he can like go in and do an area takeoff and put that in an Excel spreadsheet. That we're confident he can do that. So that's how I got in the door. But once I was in the door, I didn't just sit at my desk and do my job and go home. I would wander and I would talk to people. I would meet people. I would ask them advice. I would see what they're working on, ask questions. I would snoop on cool models, like but once you're in the door, that's the kind of stuff you can do. It's like, okay, now that I'm in, I know I don't want to stay doing area takeoffs for the rest of my
yeah.
life, right? So now that I'm in here, I need to focus on learning from all the people around me so that I can improve. And maybe if I'm lucky, maybe stay here to maybe and build up a skill set that I can then do what they're doing one day.
Yeah. And
Um, yeah,
I'm in the beginning, your introduction, we talked about all these attractions you worked on, but there was you went from doing the back of house, how many ceiling tiles do I need thing to that. It wasn't just overnight. There was this middle section, the middle area, like,
yeah,
because at the time you weren't in the concept art phase yet, right? You weren't
right.
doing the creative side. What was that area after you went in, you got past doing the tiles and the roofs, like,
Yeah. So that would be when I joined with show set design. So my first internship was in interior design, and that was the with interiors with Tori McCullough.
oh,
And then my next job was with working in show set design under Kathy Rittenauer. Um, and show set design, for anyone who isn't aware, it's really any attraction that a Disney that at a Disney park, it's during when it's being built is divided up into multiple different I guess divisions of labor, if you will. And there are the architects who build what you might say the box that the ride comes in, but then within that box there's the actual sets that you see while you're on the attraction, right? There's the
yeah,
if this is Pirates of the Caribbean, there's the box that Pirates of the Caribbean comes from, right, which is this large concrete kind of tilt up slab building. But then there's the actual like burning village that you see when you're going through the ride, and and that would be the prerogative of show set design. That's the scope of show set design, to design that kind of burning village, right? You're not designing anything structural that's really holding up the place. You're not designing that. You're laying out the catwalks and things. You're laying out the props, the environment within the jewel box, if you will, the environment within the snow globe.
Yes, that's the storytelling portion of it.
Yes, and so, but that all requires you. That requires working drawings. That requires modeled assets. That requires CDs, right, packages all onto its own, right? And so that's what I went into following. Even though I had a degree in architecture, I had done enough painting and drawing and kind of sketching that was kind of illustrative that I was able to justify going into this to show set design right out of college. I interned in show set design twice. After working at the parks, I did do a summer working at the parks as a ride operator in Tokyo Disney's California Adventure Park, as they liked for us to say.
Yeah.
And I went from the following summers into show set design, to 2 summers interning in show set design, and then I proved myself enough. I suppose I proved myself enough in those 2 summers that they brought me back and hired me full time out of college. But that again was as a draftsman. That was as a draftsman, which means I was essentially doing CDs. I was essentially doing working drawings. Though I did get to, for a time, actually paint the murals in the new Small World.
Oh,
Yeah, and
when they redid it at Tokyo.
Yep, yep.
Oh, those look great.
Yeah, and so the previous summer I got to kind of pitch ideas for it, and then the following summer I got to actually paint it, which was. And so we went over to the Tahunga building, and they had these big painting canvases tied up on the wall, and we'd go up on these lifts, and I'd actually, we'd paint we'd paint all these castles and Mickey Mouses and things across the.
Does that happen here domestically, or is that going?
Yep.
That goes
Yeah, it happens domestically, and then they roll it up,
across,
and they roll it up and ship it over there, and then they
wow.
yeah,
I would not guess that. I don't know why, but.
Yeah, it was what, but we painted. Sometimes they'll do it over there, but in this case, we painted it on stateside and rolled it up and shipped it over there. And so, so if you go in the Tokyo Disneyland, the new Small World refurb, the load unload area, I got to paint a lot of those walls, as well as I calculated a lot of the ramping in there for the ADA and such like that.
The ADA, yeah.
But yeah. So that was kind of something cool and different, because my boss saw that, hey, this kid likes to paint, he likes to draw. Maybe here's an opportunity. My Kathy Rittenauer and Tori McCullough are both very good at giving me opportunities. And looking at, seeing what I was kind of interested in, and offering me kind of when curious little jobs pop up, especially in this industry, lots of curious little jobs pop up because we do curious little things.
Yeah.
And so whenever there a curious little opportunity would rise up, say, hey, Sam showed me some of his paintings that he did in college. Maybe he would they need an extra person on this job to help him finish this off. Maybe Sam would like to do that, And so I'm really grateful that my bosses would see that. But it was because when we do these performance reviews, I would take my work with me, even if it wasn't particularly relevant to the performance review. I'd just say, hey, Kathy, I just want to show you what I've been working on in my off time. Like, look, I've been drawing, I've been painting, I've been sketching, I've been, And so every time I'd go into a performance review, we talk about, yes, you're doing great CAD work. Yes, your bosses are happy with your work. Yes, how are you? I would also say, great, awesome. Here's some other stuff I'm interested in, right?
You got to show off yourself. So put yourself out there. Show
exactly.
It's funny. I was reading the theme park project management book by your father, Val Usle, the other day, and he was telling one of the biggest things a project manager is spotting the talent, right? If you can spot the talent. And, maybe they're not ready for the big job, but you have to understand how find the talent and give them opportunities to show it, because that's, just trust them and let them run with it, because that's getting at what makes a great Imagineer someday. As it is, those little odd jobs you're talking about. It's finding that talent and kind of letting them run with it, see where they take it.
Yeah.
I think that's just one of the best things, is showing off, what you can do and putting it out there, saying, I'm capable of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because nobody's going to, if you're not telegraphing that you have these interests to your leadership, they're not gonna know, and they're just gonna, as a general rule, it can be easy for you to get pigeonholed into just doing the same thing for the rest of your life, right? And so I was always signaling that, hey, I'm working on a lot of self-development on the side, developing these sorts of skill sets, and I wouldn't know if that would ever pay dividends. And a lot of times it wouldn't pay off for weeks, months, years even, but it
Yeah.
eventually did, right? So that when that little odds and ends job came up, and so another one of those little odds and ends jobs that popped up, that is what eventually allowed me to launch into creative from this kind of world of drafting that I was doing, was that a schedule coordinator role on a new, very secret blue sky project popped up. And they literally just needed somebody who would come in and sit in the meetings and schedule the next meeting and send the Zoom links and create the invite on the Outlook calendar and
And
just
get
do.
your foot in the door again, you know?
Yeah, but exactly right. But my boss said, look, they just need somebody to do that, to go to attend these meetings and put this stuff in the schedule. But she knew that I was interested in this world of creative and blue sky, and said, look, this will be a great way for you to sit in on these meetings and kind of see how the sausage is made, if you will. Going to be in the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton, right?
Yes.
You can just witness that, right, and just start to absorb this and see how it happens. And so, of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I'd never been a schedule coordinator in my life, nor did I ever have any aspiration of being one. But it allowed me to be in the room, so I said, absolutely, 100%, yes, please. So I took on that job, and so I started going to these meetings where they were discussing this great new big beautiful project and putting art all over the walls. And I got to sit in there with these great illustrators who were working on all this stuff, and I would watch them present their work. And so for the first couple of meetings, I kind of did my job. I knew, stayed in my corner, stayed in my lane, if you will. But after a few meetings, I go, okay, I got some ideas here. This is cool. I want to start, you know, I know this is eventually what I want to do. So I'm going to start kind of, again, putting myself out there a little
Yeah.
bit. So I started bringing a sketchbook to the meetings, and as we talked, I would start drawing and I would start sketching in the meetings, and occasionally, and they would see me sketching. They'd, okay, that's interesting. And then I'd start kind of occasionally saying, hey, well, what if it's something like this? And I'd do a little sketch and pop that up and say, yeah, it's something kind of like that, or maybe not so much, right? And so they started to see I was doing that, and at first I was like, oh, well, that's isn't that nice,
The scheduler is trying to make decisions.
yeah, you're right. It's like, okay, isn't that's kind of cute? The coordinator's doing some drawing. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But over a little time, they started to notice. They knew that I had some drawing background. And then finally, they kind of divvied up the park and said, okay, we need renderings for this area, this area, and this area. And I had a lightning moment where I knew I had an idea for one of the areas of this thing. And I said, okay, I think I could do a really good rendering of that. And so on my own, without anyone asking me, I did I laid out all the schedules, I sent all the Outlook invites, I did all that stuff. And then I dedicated the next like 8 to 10 hours to just doing this digital painting of this one idea I had for this section of this project. I worked really hard on it, but tried not to make it too. You don't want it to look too resolved. You want to leave some room for the imagination.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Yep.
try too hard.
No
You
one
don't.
wants to see the specific molding you're using in the room or down to little
Right.
details. They want to like feel the emotions inside,
Yeah.
see through the idea and the thought process. You don't need to be super realistic. It's
Yeah.
about the feeling of it.
Yes, and that's what the great illustrator Herb Ryman did so well. It was that the kind of implying detail and with mood, setting the scene, right, and using a single stroke very efficiently to convey an idea. And so I try to do something in that kind of Herb Ryman mode. And I'm no Herb Ryman, but I in the spirit of that did something, and I brought that in. And once everybody had presented their work, once it looked like the lights were about to go down, once it looked like everything was settled, I said, hey, I've got one more thing. If you guys have time, I've got one more thing I'd like to show you. And so I say, oh yeah, sure, throw the lights up, right? Why don't you pop it up? And so I popped it on the screen, and then they go, huh, okay, wow, all right. Yeah, and that's when they started, oh, this kid's serious, like this, and they saw the rendering and went, okay, this actually isn't bad. This is actually all right.
Did this project get built or did it die in blue sky?
Uh, it You might see it one day.
Okay.
I don't. If it happens though, I don't think it'll be perhaps as we did it at that time, just because COVID changed so much. Um, I think a lot of the projects, I think something like it will happen one day,
Okay.
but it'll be something maybe like it, not maybe exactly what we drew. It'll have another phase where it has another blue sky and the new artists come to it and
Okay.
do their own things. But they'll probably look. I hope at least that they look at what we did and say, okay, that was interesting. We like that. Don't like that. So I imagine it'll be something along those lines.
Okay. Yeah, I know the projects got shuffled a lot. I mean, we all
Yeah.
saw that D23 2022 with the big what ifs. And
Right. Unfortunately, the COVID was such a disruptor that basically all the plans that were laid up to COVID kind of got everything
yeah,
halted or delayed or killed.
I mean, Lord
And
knows Epcot suffered. Like,
yeah, yeah. And there's sort of a post-COVID world of blue sky, and then there's the kind of pre-COVID. Very few projects survived the jump.
hiatus. Yeah.
So a few did, but it kind of killed a lot of things in their infancy, or at least put it on pause. That's a discussion maybe for another time.
Yeah, no, I'll reveal everything.
Yeah.
I was trying to throw those Fantasy Springs or not. I was thinking through the timeline in my head.
No,
Yeah.
no. Unfortunately, I can't. I can talk about Fantasy Springs because that's
Yeah,
public.
you got built. Yeah.
That's public now. I can't talk. I can talk about what you see.
Yeah.
Right?
Obviously.
Yeah.
I assume that's why I asked if it just got built or not.
Yeah, and if you're interested in specifics of that, I can talk a little bit about Fantasy Springs. If you're interested, you feel free to guide me towards that if that's something you want to talk about. But yes. Anyway, point being, I was able to take that coordinator job and put myself out there. And after that rendering, my boss said at the end of it, he said, I really like that drawing. I'd like to see you take on this thing over here. Why don't you come in next time? Why don't you come in with another rendering of this area over here? So I said, okay, this kid could draw a bit. I'm going to give him another task. So they started giving me a task, right? Say, why don't you take a look at this? So they, in the same way that they were divvying up work to the other artists, they started divvying up some work to me as well. And I went, great, awesome. And so for like half a year, for several months, I was functionally, and I guess I kept bringing in work that was satisfactory enough because they kept asking me to do more of it.
Yeah.
And eventually to the point where they actually did pick some of my art to present to the three Bobs for the big presentation.
Paul Iger, Chapek, and
Weiss. Yeah, at that time it was Bob.
Yeah. Not anymore.
Bob Iger, Bob Chapek was Bob Iger, CEO of the company, Bob Chapek, CEO of Parks and Resorts, and Bob Weiss, head of Walt Disney Imagineering.
And we're going really far back in the timeline now.
Yeah, yes, that's kind of if that kind of sets you when this was all kind of pre-COVID, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, Sam and I are going to take a quick little break while you hear a brief message from our sponsor, Theme Park Social. They'll make sure to stick around because we have so many more great stories right here from Imagineering, the stories behind the storytellers. We'll see you guys in a minute.
Love theme parks, but tired of going it alone? Introducing Theme Park Social, the first app built to connect thrill seekers just like you. Whether you're solo, a family, or a group of friends, find your park tribe and plan unforgettable adventures. Match, chat, ride. It's that easy with Theme Park Social. The ride of your life starts with one swipe. Join Theme Park Social today and never ride alone again.
Welcome back to Imagineering, the stories behind the storytellers. We're here again with Sam Usle. Sam, we left off, we were talking about getting the foot in the door, going from that role of the scheduler, the coordinator, into the art. Let's get right back into it.
Sure. Yeah, and so I was able to, again, roll that coordinator job into producing artwork, and then having the leader of the project start to assign tasks, start to assign me some scope of the project, to eventually to the point where I was actually given a kind of one of the slices of the project to actually work on. And I got to work alongside, and the coolest thing was I got to work alongside the best artists at the company, these veteran artists who were doing a lot better work than I was. But it was such, but I could, every day I could come in there, see the work they were doing, and it would kind of challenge me to do better. Right. And I would see the kind of stuff they're doing. Like, okay, that's how he approached this. I'm going to try that. And of course I wouldn't do it as well, but it was constantly, I went through a kind of rapid period of growth because I was testing my work up against the work of the best. And it wasn't as good, but you know what? It does make you better.
Yeah.
And so I went for, I want to say for about almost a year, where I was technically a draftsman in a coordinator role doing creative level artwork. And sometimes they wouldn't always be able to justify it. So sometimes there would be a couple of weeks where I would actually have to go back to doing more of my drafting work, depending on how much work there was at any given point in time. And so there were some points where I would have to, I would spend my morning drafting building a couple leaves for a Revit model for the Tangled ride in Fantasy Springs,
Oh,
building one of what we call the Sputniks, or these, they look like the Sputnik satellite that went over in the 60s.
yeah.
Was it?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but basically they stick all the different fake plants into these kind of little bulbs, and that's what kind of creates the illusion that you're under a tree. And so I would spend my morning modeling one of those in Rhino to be imported into Revit. Just very up close, kind of very up close kind of work, very up close detailed work for CDs. And then I would spend my afternoon in some creative pitch meeting for like, hey, what if we built this mountain in this overseas overseas region, right? Or what if we, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. What if we did a roller coaster in it's just total blue sky kind of stuff.
Like the original Indiana Jones pitch for Disneyland.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing. So I just if forest, my day was total forest and total trees. Like literally, the morning would be like staring at a leaf this close, and then the evening would be like forest level, broad kind of work.
Hey, that's like the Imagineer's dream right there. You're getting the best of everything.
Yeah, yeah. It was great exposure. But eventually, I was able to finally, after about a year of doing that, my boss was able to say, you've done a great job at this. We want to we're going to shift you full time from show set design into creative. And so I was able to kind of sidestep into creative, but it took a year from what I was doing functionally to actually catch up, my role to actually functionally, in terms of title, catch up with what I was functionally doing every day. But I give that example as a way of like, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't put myself out there. And also if I hadn't been developing these skills on the side, if I hadn't been practicing painting while I was still a draftsman, I wouldn't have been able to do that when that opportunity came along, right? And it was only because nobody's going to walk. And the reason I say that is because, it's as a point of advice, if you are doing the drafting work, but you want to be in the room where it happens, if you're not developing that set of skills to get into that room, you're going to miss the boat when the boat comes.
Yeah, you gotta be ready for it.
Right, you've got to be ready for it. And so I was constantly kind of telegraphing, like constantly working on the side my paint student. And so that was like a fun for me. It was like drawing scenes of all these old European cities. That was kind of a big inspiration for me. Or I'd even try to do like paintings and sketching in my own hometown, but I would pin these up around my cubicle and people would go, oh, that's cool. But it would take months for that to pay off, but it eventually would, right? Because eventually people would see, oh yeah, he is kind of doing some of that painting stuff, right? And so then when I finally got that role as a coordinator, I was good enough at least at painting that I could paint just well enough to stay in the room and actually become an artist. But if I hadn't, my point is nobody's going to walk into the cubicle of you as a draftsman and say, hey, would you like to learn to become an artist today?
You got show them that you want and your talent for it and stuff. So.
Yes. Right. Nobody's going to come along and say, hey, I'd like to pick you up out of the gutter and make you it's extremely rare. Right.
I wish it happened often.
Yeah. You can't count on it. And if that's what you're waiting for, you're never going to move. And
no, you're a man who's trying to be lucky, not skilled at something.
Yeah. And so, but I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I'd say there were a lot of people who would talk about, oh, I wish I could be in creative. Oh, I'd love to be in creative, or I'd love to be an illustrator. And you say, well, have you been painting? No, not really. Have you been drawing? Have you been working on these skills? No, I haven't really touched a pen and paper in a while. It's like, well, then, okay, well.
Yeah. It's like an architecture school when you're at your pin up and you can either have the best drafting, best, renderings, best concept ever, and you can have a mediocre like speech, or you have like complete garbage on your pinup board, but you can give the best spiel of your life. That's like what you're saying when you don't have the actual art stuff done. You're hoping that you could save yourself by saying some things, but you don't have the work to back it up.
Right, right. You're just a talker,
Yeah.
and so there are some talkers who are successful, but as a general rule, I recommend
Yeah. Make it a
preparing
little easier as
prepare
well.
prepare. I guess there's something to the kind of dress for the role you want. Well, prepare the skills for the role you want. You may still be a draftsman. Nothing's stopping you from becoming a painter while you're a draftsman. Nothing's stopping you from learning how to, I don't know, become a better orator while
Yeah.
you're.
It's something they don't really teach in architecture school. So,
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily you drawing those buildings and learning it yourself and really trying to fractal in your own time,
yeah.
definitely seems like a big thing in your development as an Imagineer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially these days on YouTube, and there's all sorts of ways you can engage in self-development just with free programs like YouTube, and you don't even necessarily need to go to school. I never went to school for painting. I never went to school for illustration, but I was drawing with people who all went to school for
Yeah.
illustration.
The best of the best.
Yeah, I did have some holes in my fundamentals because of that. I would run across these problems. I was like, wow, I'd kind of run into these speed bumps or go, oh man, I'm trying to do a bit more than I'm capable of because clearly I missed a lesson somewhere that would have
Yeah.
been helpful here, but that's when you ask one of the, just you're around all these veterans who know this stuff and you ask them to come over
Well, that's the beauty of it. I think your story is so perfect because the way you got into Imagineering and like when talking, you talk to the people you mentored other,
Mhm.
right? You worked hand in hand with, I'm going to ramble off some names. Tony Baxter,
I
Imagineering
didn't. Yeah, so I
legend.
didn't work with him, but I've mentored under him for several years now.
Yes.
I haven't had the privilege of working with him on a project officially. Yeah,
Mentoring is
yeah,
even
but
better, perhaps. But
yes, but
you mentored our Tony. I know you talked about in our scenarios the influence of Joe Rody that
yep, I
happened.
did work with
Obviously,
Joe. I did get to work with Joe.
oh, that's
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah,
Joe Rody is so great in what he
yeah,
does. And
yep.
then, even your father, Val, I mean, he may
Hmm.
not be the guy that everyone knows on top of their head when you talk about like Avatar or something, like everyone knows Joe Rody. But if you look at the work that him and then his work with Bob Weiss and Frank Stanek, like he is one of the biggest like project managers you could think of in Imagineering. Working with all these people, I can only imagine the influence it had on you and your design philosophies and really the mindset you went about things.
Absolutely. Each of them were are a huge influence on me. I My dad, of course, again, really, my dad is like I think of my dad like one of Napoleon's logistical marshals, right? There's Napoleon had several marshals that he would delegate jobs to in these huge campaigns, right? And some of them he'd send off into battle on the front lines. They'd kind of be the glorious ones on the front lines, getting all the
Yeah.
glory and the big cavalry charge. But then some guys like Marshal Berthier, they'd be behind the lines and they'd be organizing the logistics. All right, I have to send the second corps over here, and I'd have to send third corps this way, and third corps needs a supply line. And and the thing is, none
The
of
backbone of the
the
whole
whole
operation.
campaign falls apart if you don't have those Marshal Berthiers. And in fact, Napoleon did not have Marshal Berthier on the Waterloo campaign. Make of
Oh,
that
the
as you
famous
will.
collapse.
But the point being, like, there's several of those guys, those key people who make it all happen from that way. And my dad also he did get to actually, especially in Tokyo Disney Sea, do a lot of artwork and architectural design
Well,
for that project as well. So he actually got to stretch his artistic skills as well. So by no means did he only ever just stick in logistics, but that was probably what he made his name internally within the company doing was kind of organizing the troops, right, and
yeah.
scheduling and laying out process for this stuff. So I learned from my dad a lot of like this kind of practical skills. I'm not as good as he is at that stuff. I'll be honest. I haven't cultivated that skill set as much as he has. But he's absolutely, and then that book, I'm really glad you bought his book because his books are full of those kinds of lessons and
I mean, it's
everything
really
that guys like
enlightening.
everything that guys like me draw on some paper. It just stays on the paper unless you have people like him actually laying, executing.
No, yeah, truthfully,
Yeah, yeah,
I'll be honest, in the world of Imagineering, I'd never really focused on a project manager role
Yeah.
before, right? And reading the book, I'm like amazed by all the project manager stuff. I'm like, wow, this is like way more than you ever imagined. And
Yeah.
they really are the backbone of the whole operation and everything.
Yeah. And people like me give them headaches. And so I guess what the interesting thing for me was that as I moved into more of the creative role, I had grown up listening to my dad talk about how at the dinner, and my dad would always talk about his job at the dinner table, which was so great because I could just listen in to see kind of what kind of problems was he solving at work today. And I would hear about him interfacing with creative people and how, frankly, how difficult creative people can be sometimes. you know and so as I moved into more of a creative role, I thought, okay, well, I know I don't want to be I want to be a creative person, but I know I don't want to be like that, right?
You don't want to be the pain in the side guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would always try to, at least in my creative role, think about, okay, who's gonna take this drawing I make and try to make something out of it, right? Who's receiving it? What's it like for the person on the receiving end of this thing I'm pitching? Because I would see these pitch meetings where a creative person would walk into a room and they'd say, I've got this great idea and here's my drawing for it, and it's going to sing and it's going to dance and there will be music and there will be lights and there will be water fountains blowing in the air and people will be clapping and there will be colors and there'll be and there's, in that room, as that creative person is pitching that idea, there is an engineer in the corner watching this going, oh, it's dancing, how is it dancing? Oh, it's spinning. Well, how far is it spinning? Is it doing a full 360 rotation? Okay, is it going to keep doing that 360 rotation? Well, if there's a hose attached, so that hose is going to keep getting coiled in on itself, right? So how is the water going to keep coming out? Because that hose is just going to stop it from turning. Oh, there's music? Wait, is that background music or is that a new music system? Do we have to shut off all the background area music of the land in order to do that, and give it its own
Yes.
unique?
It's always logistics. Then the
Right.
mind of a creative person, it never crosses the mind.
Exactly. And the creative person is just going, oh, and the creative person is just up there hoping, oh, feelings. Everyone's going to just be so moved by the feelings, right? And then the engineers in the room just going, right, constraint. Oh, I just heard a constraint. Oh, that constraint, right? And that there has to be a translation from the feelings and the
You never get anything done if there wasn't.
right. But you need that creative person and that vision in the first place, because ultimately what we are selling is a feeling, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately what we were selling is a moment in time, is
An experience.
an experience, right? And so you need that, but there's a point of translation. So I think what I tried to learn from my dad was how to present my work in such a way that I was not a thorn in the side of the people who would be receiving my work on the other side, and could actually engage in kind of effective translation of that creative work into execution. I don't know how successful I was, but I tried to, as someone who and I actually even got to have experience being on the side of receiving some engineers or some creative person's sketch and trying to turn it into a real, working thing with constraints. And so I got to have a lot of experience on the other side of receiving the creative idea. And then I also got to hear my dad's experience from that. And so I tried to, at least when I actually got into creative, at least be cognizant of that, or be more appreciative of that.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful I was, but at least I tried.
And we'll see if that one project ever gets built. We'll see how successful it was.
Yeah.
Folks, Tony Baxter, Joe Rohde, two of the biggest names in Imagineering in the last,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say the last 40 years. Right?
Yeah.
What's that like? That's a big question, but
well, it's really cool I grew up watching a lot of those Travel Channel shows at the time.
The Travel USA and stuff, where it's,
yeah. I don't know if they still do these kind of things, but
I don't think so. I remember when I was younger, they ran this one about Disney World. And I had it on my DVR for like 10 years. And I would randomly turn it on one day for my DVR. And I remember it was when Art of Animation was being built. And they were promoting Art of Animation. And there was this clip of Bob Gurr sitting in front of the Contemporary talking about the monorail. And there's Bob Weiss, Tony Baxter, and all these legends. And like I would just watch it on repeat. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing.
Yeah, I hope they're still doing the equivalent of that. I don't know, maybe on YouTube or some of these streaming services. I know they have the Behind the Attraction.
I think the Imagineering story was like,
and the Imagineering story by Leslie was really great. By Leslie.
Yeah,
Owens.
that was fantastic.
Highly recommend that one. My dad's actually in that one.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to find it. I watched that series like I remember every morning.
It's a quick shot, but he's in there. And
He made it longer than most Imagineers probably doing that show.
yeah, it's a shot with him, Bob Weiss, and Craig Russell in their office in Tokyo Disneyland. They're all crammed. It's when they were all first hired, and they're crammed into that office working for Frank Stanek over there.
Yeah.
The fun photo. They got their feet up on the desk. It's really funny.
I
Uh,
remember when that show first came out, like the first couple months of Disney Plus, it came out every Friday morning. I'd wake up like 6 a.m. to get ready for school, and immediately I'd hop down the couch downstairs, turn the show for 20 minutes each day while I quickly ate my cereal and stuff, and I would just watch it. And I was like, oh my gosh.
it's so critical to getting guys like you interested and thinking about this, and kind of cultivating that interest in the next generation. I hope they still are. I worry that they aren't, but I hope they're still cultivating that interest.
Well,
And
it feels like
yeah,
this era of Disney storytelling, Disney Imagineers, the one that were the Tony Baxters, the Joe Rohdes, the
yeah.
Val Usleys, it's kind of fading away. You know what I mean? We have this new guard coming in,
Hmm.
very good, I think, for some things we're seeing. The America's Land coming to Animal Kingdom. I really love that land. I think it looks great. So there's things we're doing well, but I think it's important that we still have this old school Disney Imagineering, this
Yeah,
passion and design for it, and like really like heart in the projects. That's
yeah.
still there.
Yeah, there's got to be a handoff, right? Because they received the handoff from the Walt generation. There was an initial generation that worked with Walt
Well, yes,
directly.
your Mark
Uh,
Davises.
yeah, right. And they were the guys who they had the big career with. Usually they started in animation with him, and then he brought them over there. But they were all adults. They never got to be kids in a Disney theme park, right? And this is something Tony Baxter talks a lot about. It's like guys like my dad, guys like Tony, Eddie Sato, even Joe Rohde. That their generation, they grew up with Disneyland.
Yes,
Maybe
Disney
even
was
worked.
their
Maybe,
childhood. Like,
yep. Maybe even worked in it as a high school student or young kid.
so what? Tony
So
ice
ice
cream,
cream,
and your
ice
dad
cream.
was Retlaw, right?
Yeah, he drove the monorail.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in those little bubbles in the early.
Oh, that monorail. Oh
He
my
had, he had the
gosh.
he had the cool
Going old school retro of that one.
aviators and the spandex outfit and everything. It's great. So he had this really cool job. Tony was in the ice cream shop, and then I think he also did the mine train, the old mine train before.
Nature's Wonderland.
Yeah, I believe he also drove that for a time.
Oh man.
But the point is, but they actually got to grow up with the park. They actually got to know what it was like to be in the park as a kid. The guys like Claude Coates or Mark Davis or Herb Ryman, they never actually got to have that experience as a kid. So there's that second generation, and they got the handoff from that first generation. In the case of Tony, he mentored directly under Claude Coates,
Whew.
who was famous for he did all the backdrops for Haunted Mansion, for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
But of course, in animation, he did
His
Lady
famous
and the Tramp
paintings.
and tons of those backdrops as well. So he got the direct handoff from him, right? And a lot of in terms of Craig Russell, he got it from Bob Gurr, right? So there's kind of a direct handoff, more or less, from that generation. For my dad, it was Frank Stanek, right? He got that from Frank. So they had the direct handoff. So then,
And
all right. So like you're saying, now that generation is kind of the sun. There's a sunset on that generation. So there's got to be another handoff, right? And so that's why I've spent a lot of time trying to mentor under guys like Tony. And I've had the privilege of for several years now, getting to mentor directly under him and get to go sit at his house and have these great long chats into the evening, after a movie, and we discuss
oh my gosh,
Disney
his
parks.
house looks like Fantasyland.
Oh
Like
yeah, oh yeah.
if you see
It's
the YouTube video and stuff, yeah. Yeah.
it's absolutely incredible. He'll just pull off. He'll just pull, a cell from Sleeping Beauty off the wall, or one of the 50 models of a Nautilus that he's got, or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
he's got one of the fish from Ben-Hur, the movie Ben-Hur, one of the fish lap counters from the Great
Oh,
Chariot Race.
really?
He's
Oh,
got the
yeah.
Ten Commandments from the Ten Commandments movie, right? And so also it's a house of curiosities in
The
the
living
Ben.
story in that house constantly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I've had the privilege of kind of mentoring in that environment, and
Yeah.
he's thought through this stuff in a way that I don't think anyone else has. Joe also has spent a lot of time thinking through this. Joe's developed a kind of a very, I think, academic philosophy around it, and I think Tony's developed a very kind of practical philosophy around it, and both are useful. But I think I really connect with Tony's kind of more, I think, more practical school of Imagineering, which or the aspirational school of Imagineering, if you might call it, the kind of very simple, why is this fun
Yeah.
question. I think
Yeah, I
I think
remember.
his whole way of
If
just
you're not enjoying it, it's not gonna be a good ride.
right.
If you don't enjoy a slow
Yeah.
ride through some bad jokes about Hollywood, no one's gonna
Yeah.
like Superstar Limo.
Yeah.
But if you're going through this big adventure in the Temple of Doom, and there's fire everywhere, and there's stuff falling, and there's these snakes, it's exciting. You're living the story actively.
Mhm.
Someone's gonna enjoy that.
Right. But even that's a great example because you think of the snakes, like, okay, again, Tony's always able to bring things back very simply to the why is this fun question. And this, I think Tony's really thought through this stuff in a way where he can take something as complex as a theme park ride and boil it down to its most core components of why it works.
Yeah.
Right. I think Joe has a different skill. I think Joe is able to take a lot of these things that may seem simple on the surface and actually boil and actually really break down why the complexities behind it
Yeah. I mean, like
and
look up
and kind of blow your mind with all
like
these different ways in which you could approach this
yeah,
thing.
like
Tony's
Harambe
kind of
Village. Harambe
yeah,
Village is so incredibly detailed.
right.
Everything. Animal can't like
And there's so many rabbit holes you can go down and that's kind of the great thing about Joe. He's able to take something simple as a theme park queue and just sort of blow it up into all these different layers. I think Tony's skill set, he's able to take the complexity of all this stuff and boil it back to its most simple core concept.
yeah.
But even if I can take it back to that again, that indie
Yes.
ride, like the why is this fun, right? You mentioned the snakes in the indie ride. All right, well, why is a snake? Why would snakes, the scale of snakes in the real world, be fun in the Indiana Jones ride? So, for example, when you enter the room with the big snake, a lot of people don't notice there's hundreds of little small actual scale snakes around the room. Very few
Yeah.
people notice because you can say, well, there's a real snake, and there's no giant snakes in the Indiana Jones films. But in the Indiana Jones films, when the camera pans in on the snake, right, that snake looks larger than life. That snake is huge.
Mhm.
That snake is filling the frame. Well, when you're on a theme park ride,
Yeah, zoom in.
a snake that big is not going to fill the frame of your view. So you actually need a kind of supernaturally sized snake in order to fill your view and give you the same effect that you would have in, say, a film, right? But it goes back to the why is this fun question, right? Is sure it may be realistic to have a room full of snakes, and maybe there's no reason in the story that a giant snake, supernaturally sized snake, is in the room, but maybe why is that fun? Well, it isn't
Yeah.
fun. Okay, so we need the large snake to make this work.
There's
Anyway,
always the place for realism. Yeah, I think
yeah.
at least in my knowledge, again, I don't
Mhm.
work for them, but in my knowledge, as the guy who watches a lot of stuff and reads a lot of stuff, your geographic, historical stuff, realism all the way. Your Animal Kingdom, where it's about life and everything. Your Epcot, where
Mhm.
it's the living world showcase of all the nations. But there's also times where it's like this overwhelming feeling of a place when you're walking through Fantasyland, all the little buildings, all these intricate detailing, quick changes. You got Mr. Toad in one area, then the stylized look of Peter Pan, a Snow White,
Right.
and then Indy. Honestly, Indy's amazing. I did a review of Indy actually, and I talked about how I thought it was the best ride in the whole resort, even better than Radiator Springs Racers, just because
Yeah.
of how much you feel immersed in the story. Whether that be, I know opening, when you go up that first scene right out of the station, the projection and like the wall just moving away, so it appeared you're going down the three different tunnels, or when all of a sudden the boulder comes rolling towards you and it always black and like you feel like you're dropping everything. Just everything's so intricate there, so story
Yeah.
driven. It feels like you're right in the Indiana Jones story.
Yeah.
It's so incredible the different ways that it's all done, and like Disney Decade was great. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd love to see something like it again. But yeah, that ride especially, it's like a synthesis of three great attraction systems. It's a synthesis of it's like a bit of Mr. Toad and the kind of original Fantasy Dark rides,
Yes.
but it's a bit of Star Tours with the sim element that they were exploring, right? With the simulator kind of motion base.
Yep.
But then it's also just a classic thrill coaster ride in the sense that you're actually kinetically
Yeah.
moving through a ride building back and forth, right? And so it takes the coaster element, the sim element, and the kind of that kind of Mr. Toad early fantasy dark ride element, all of which they had done well and somewhere else, and it brought those all together in one very aspirational setting with this Indiana Jones
Yeah, I
theme.
mean, it takes three rides I love. The first time I went to Disneyland, I was 5, I think, and Mr. Toad was my favorite ride. I rode Mr.
Yeah.
Toad on repeat every single time,
Mhm.
right? And then Star Tours,
Yeah.
May not have the longest line ever at Disneyland nowadays. The Star Tour's still incredible rides, incredible
Mhm.
motion simulator. Really led a
Mhm.
whole, series of these we see, even like SeaWorld parks had them, you know what I mean? And then roller coasters, half this job's about roller coasters. So,
Yeah.
it combines everything. And it's this full package of
Yeah.
experience, which I think is so great.
And this is why you really have to understand the medium here is that this is not the written medium. This is not even the film medium. It has probably most in common with the film medium, but it's not the film medium. I would actually argue it probably has a little bit more in common with the gaming medium. Um, but you have to understand the medium and that this is not literal storytelling.
Yeah.
And if you get too caught up in the literal, you can actually miss what you're really doing is kind of setting the stage for the guest to have a story.
Yeah.
For the guest to have an authentic experience. You kind of want them to feel like they've wandered onto the set of a great film, and there's a little bit of stuff happening over here, and there's a little bit of happening over there. Pirates of the Caribbean, my favorite attraction. I know Indy's probably my second, but Pirates of the Caribbean's Disneyland specifically is my favorite.
I'm about to say, not the Disney World.
Yeah, World's fine, but
it's fine. It's not Thunder Mesa, like
having the whole bayou sequence in the beginning just takes the cake for me.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and but when Pirates of the Caribbean was when Pirates of the Caribbean was under construction and they were laying out all these figures down there, and initially there was a lot of concern that, hey, there's going to be a lot of overlapping audio here. You're going to be hearing this pirate over here talking, you're going to be hearing another guy over here, and there's going to be a lot of you're going to be hear the auctioneer barking over there, and then there's going to be some pirate chatting over here. There was a lot of worry that I guess going to pick up on the story, or is that going to conflict? Is there going to be confusion?
It makes it feel like real life.
Yeah, that
again. In real life, it's not just one audio at a time. It's not.
Yeah, and that's what Walt says. He's like, it'll be like going to a cocktail party. When you go to a cocktail party, and kind of maybe this isn't as relevant today, but when you go to a cocktail,
there's like 20,000 conversations going on. You just kind of go around mingling.
But you kind of your ear kind of you hear something, and your ear kind of locks in, and then you're able to kind of drown out the other stuff and kind of lock in on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Tell me the story of Pirates of the Caribbean: The Ride.
Yeah. Gotcha. We're gonna hit that right after this break.
Sure.
A moment from our sponsors.
little cliffhanger there.
Theme Park Social makes your theme park trips easy and fun. Connect with friends, share your location, and find each other fast. No more lost texts. Just open the app and see where everyone is. Plan meetups, find rides, grab food together, and enjoy the day without the hassle. Download Theme Park Social and make every park day stress-free and unforgettable.
Pirates of the Caribbean, complex as ever, but that is what real life in that time period would have been like, right?
You would like to think life in that period would have been like, right? So, Walt himself said of I think Main Street that it's not Main Street as Marceline, Missouri as it was. It's how he remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to actual Marceline, great little Main Street.
The museum there is very nice.
Yeah, wonderful museum there. But Disneyland's Main Street's more magical. The seed of an aspirational idea was planted there, and it's important. And I'd say a similar thing with the Age of Pirates. And so, they took out some of perhaps the seedier side of Pirates, and I think over the years they've taken out even more of that. But it really keys into what I love about it is it really keys into when they're having pirates in that setting, that world. What if we really key into what's the most fun thing? Why is it fun to think about pirates, or why is it aspirational to dream of being in that world of pirates? That ride, I think, more than anything else, just taps into that perfectly. And I think it's been so definitive that it's literally defined. I think everyone after that attraction who dreams up a pirate world is in some way referring to that original ride.
Well, you say anything about pirates, like real life or imaginary. My first thought goes to Pirates of the Caribbean when you're leaving that cave and you're pulled up to this pirate ship and you're left with the cannons blasting water, and on the right there's this fort, the cannons going in and out as the projection of Jack Sparrow's on the straight ahead. Like it's this big dramatic moment where it's just like your jaw drops. You're like, wow. It's this reveal. It goes from the small caves and stuff into this big grand reveal, and then it shrinks back down into the city. And the way it kind of steers the narrative is so impressive. It's show design.
it hits all those notes you could ever want. Even the color palette of that blue and yellow, the orange, those are adventurous colors, right?
Yeah.
It cues into exactly what I think anyone who's ever been dreamed of being a pirate, those feelings, those settings, those aspirations, it hits every single one of those notes perfectly. And Gore Verbinski, to the point where Gore Verbinski, when he set out saying, "Hey, Hollywood hasn't made a great pirate movie in years, pirate movie. Let's make a great pirate movie." He said it's got to be Pirates of the Caribbean because it had just so defined in his psyche what the world of pirates is that he went to Disney and said, "Look, I want to make a pirate movie. It's got to be based on this world because it's just so defined how we perceive the world of pirates." The video game Sea of Thieves that's out now. In fact, those developers, when they were dreaming up this pirate world, it's again, it's just so it maybe wasn't the pirates as it exactly was. And I'm also interested in real pirate history. I've one of the great things that I've found about fantasy settings, because you can say, well, isn't it not great to tell a fictional tale of this world of pirates? Isn't that kind of lying to people? It's like, I don't think so. And because I fell in love with Pirates of the Caribbean world, I've now developed a love of actual history of piracy, not just in the Caribbean, but also the
Yeah.
Mediterranean as well. And so but that seed of developing the love for it and that aspiration for it has allowed me to enter into it more willfully as an academic subject.
Yes. You know, I think that's one of the best things Imagineering does over the course of the company, from the beginning up to now, is telling you something based off of the history, right? It's going into this historical setting or this historical place you can't visit anymore, and it's immersing you into it. Whether it be, Norway, right? You're walking up to the Norway Pavilion, you see that large, iconic building with its Norwegian architecture out in the very front of the pathway. It draws you in. You see the waterfall out by the entrance to the Frozen
Save
ride.
church.
Yes. Or if you're walking through Italy and you see
Mm-hmm.
the tower there and everything, it's bringing you to these settings
Campanile.
that you can't otherwise visit. And I think it's just been such a strong point of Imagineering, a keen aspect
Yeah.
of it over the years.
Well, in this case, in these cases, you can actually visit
Well,
them,
you
but
can now,
what it
yeah.
does is it plants the seed of interest. I would argue that having those sometimes you actually go to the real place and it's not as fulfilling as the fantasy. Like, for example, I found the first time I actually went to the real New Orleans after a lifetime of growing up in New Orleans Square. New Orleans Square has windy streets that are always kind of hiding and revealing things and
Yeah.
creating very interesting. The actual New Orleans is on a grid.
Yes.
And so when I went to the real New Orleans and I saw these big, long, straight boulevards with a skyscraper at the end of it, I was kind of like, oh man, I wish it was on. I wish it wasn't on a grid because, right? I actually think Disneyland's New Orleans of kind of revealing and hiding scenes is a little bit more
Yeah.
powerful. That's not. I still love the actual New Orleans though.
It's funny. I
But
was first time I went to Disneyland, I drove, right? We drove
yeah.
from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, all the way to Disneyland. We went
Oh
through
wow.
New Orleans on
Okay.
the way there. So I
Okay.
went through New Orleans, I went through the Painted Desert, I went through all these different
You
areas.
saw the real stuff first, and
Yes.
then okay.
Because I was always like a history nerd growing up. I was the guy who loved going to the national parks and stuff, and
Yeah.
seeing that and then getting to Disneyland, you're like it hits differently
Hmm.
because you realize like this is based off of these real places. It's based off of nature, but it stylizes it.
Yeah.
It forms it into this narrative, story-based thing, and it brings you into the days of yesteryear when you're
Hmm.
traveling through the Painted Desert and like New Mexico area. You're going through this, you're like, oh, I wonder what this was back in the 1700s.
Yeah.
You get to Frontierland, you're like, this is what it's like. You know what I mean? You're into the Painted Desert and everything on Big Thunder Mountain. Like you're immersed into these places and things, and it really is moving. It's phenomenal feeling.
Yeah. You're immersed into the most aspirational parts of those places. I would say those places that most key into your heart. And from that we can then I think it's meant to inspire a kind of curiosity that you then take back into the world with you. Like the original Disneyland plaque reads, Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, dreams, and hard facts that created America with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world. And before that, it says, Disneyland is your land. Here, age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the promise and challenges of the future. In other words, it's meant to be a place where you come together as a family, you experience kind of the highlights, you take the most aspirational highlights, and then you kind of take that, and it sparks your curiosity that you then take back with you into the real world, and it re-enchants the real world.
Yes.
And you can return to the Tolkien had a great way of talking about this kind of process in which fantasy re-enchants the real world as well, and it kind of refreshes us. And he talked, the way he put it was, we can see green in a fantasy novel better than we see it in real life. Almost the green in the fantasy novel is greener, right? It's the most green you've ever imagined. When you read that about the green of the woods on the page of the fantasy novel, it's the most green you ever imagined. But then you come away invigorated, refreshed, and then you come back into your own world, and you can again see the grass and see that it is green, right? And it kind of allows you to reapproach reality from a different angle, a little more refreshed, and perhaps a little more appreciative, and a little and seeing it from perhaps a side you hadn't thought of it before. And it kind of helps to re-enchant the real world as well. And I think that's what great stories should do. They allow us to kind of escape into a world of secondary belief, but then return to the real world refreshed.
It inspires you in a way in which the inspiration does not end when you read that last page of the book.
Yeah. It kind of allows you to kind of come back with the eyes of a child and kind of see, I'm a parent now of three, hopefully, in January, number 4.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
I've got 3 toddlers, and I get to watch them experience just the simplest things in the world for the first time. And again, when they see the grass, they really see that it is green, right? And when they feel the wind, I remember watching them feel the wind for the first time in their lives.
Oh, that's cute.
And feel the wind. If I went outside and felt the wind, I go, yeah. Right. But I've watched them feel the wind for the first time, and I watched it. Their eyes light up. Oh, what's this? What is this? Wow. And they're standing there just feeling. Right.
It's the wonder and the curiosity.
It's a wonder. It's enchanted. It's a curiosity. And I actually think I'm looking, and as I watch them, I go, you know what? They're closer to the truth than I am. They're actually closer to the reality. That is a wonderful thing. The wind is a wonderful thing. The wind is wondrous. The wind is beautiful and fantastic and curious. That is a curious thing. You know what? I actually think that their wonder is closer to reality than my, now 30-something year jaded experience with the wind, right? You know what I mean? Like, so it allows you to kind of repress. And I think that's actually more like what these Disney parks do, is that I think it allows you, especially when you go with somebody new. One of my favorite things is to go to the parks now with somebody new and watch them experience it for the first time. Because I think what these parks do is they allow us to see reality with those fresh eyes again, see reality again with the eyes of a child, see history again with a bit of those eyes of the child. And that hopefully we shouldn't stop there. We shouldn't stay there. We should then come back into the real world more, perhaps a little more enchanted, a little more appreciative, a little more eyes for wonder. We should feel the wind again.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You touched upon that. Yeah, that bringing curiosity, and I think that's what the Disney parks do. They bring you back to those years of your childhood when you're riding that carousel in Fantasyland, and you hear the instrumental music, and you feel the wind coming through, and you see all the lights and the everything, all the kinetic energy, and you hear Dumbo going across the way, and the Casey Jr. train in the background. They bring you back to those childhood days, and instill this sense of like wonder in you as you're drawn down Main Street towards the castle. There's a large point. You're like, what is behind that drawbridge door? It really is magical that Disney's done so well over the years. It really perfected. And bringing back to your own work, the work you did, I think one of the things that hits those 3 things is my favorite ride of Fantasy Springs. Haven't been, but from what I can just tell, my personal favorite, the Rapunzel ride. Stunning ride. It immerses you in the story of Rapunzel. Fantastic story. I think iconic with the generation of people who are now young adults and stuff. Coming out 2011 or around there. Like, fantastic film. And just this overall gorgeous setting. right? It's this
Mhm.
beautiful, small, slow boat ride, your traditional Disney attraction, capacity, it's great capacity, great appeal, great for rewritability.
Mhm.
It really is one of those things where it's fun and it's intriguing and it takes you to a place where you can't go, you can't visit,
Mhm.
Rapunzel's kingdom necessarily. I believe
Yeah,
it's like based off of German stuff, right?
and that ride's a great example of focus. They were actually able to justify building something that's almost an e-ticket with more of a D-ticket funding, um, because they were able to have a lot of focus in the creative direction of that attraction. They said, we're just going to focus this ride on the best day ever,
Hmm.
right? Which is from a kind of concept from the film, right? Is that one day she gets to go outside her tower,
Yes.
best day ever, and anything that's not about the best day ever is cut out, right? So we're not going to do any of the a lot of the Mother Gothel stuff, right? Which is
You
the
don't need that common villain. It's not
villainous
one of those
arc of the
attractions
thing.
where we have that enemy we're focusing on.
Yeah, so exactly. They're not actually telling the story of Tangled, the film. They're not actually telling the book report of the whole movie. They're
I
just
think that's the thing.
focusing
Commonly
on
gets confused for like that Little Mermaid style attraction where it's the
yeah.
retelling it. It's not, it's
No, it's not. It's not a book report. It's just focused on the best day ever, which is the day she got to leave her tower and go experience the world for the first time. Right.
yeah,
And the whole ride is about that and nothing else. But because it had that focus, it was able to execute on that best day ever concept very well. Um, and so it's actually my daughter's favorite movie. My daughter's favorite movie right now. She loves the "I See the Light." At last, I see the light.
oh, it's a great song.
She asked me to sing that to her every night before she goes to bed. It's adorable. But yeah, and so that ride is a great example of focus. I got to work on it. I got to work on it a fair bit. I got to influence a little bit of the ride, and just
Oh,
some small ways. That when you first approach, I got to design the interior queue,
oh,
or
it's a
kind of
great
be the
looking
first.
cute.
Yeah, um, a great architect named Stephanie laid out the exterior of the attraction. Laid out the exterior of this great boathouse that the whole road unload and queue was going to take place in, but
Yeah,
nobody had tackled what the inside would be like. And so I was the first one who kind of got to take a crack at what the inside of this whole queue is going to be like. And so I built this model, and but it was so fun because I got to think about, okay, well, what is this? All right, it's a boathouse. So all right, so a boat builder lives here. All right, so where does he? Okay, a boat builder lives here. Right, where does he sleep? Where does he sleep in this boathouse? Well, there's a loft space up there. If this is a workshop, he's probably going to have a lot of tools and stuff on the ground level. That's probably not the place you want to sleep. You're probably going to want to sleep in the loft. Okay, he's going to sleep up in the loft. Well, what kind of bed would the boat builder sleep in? Is he going to buy a bed for himself? Well, I don't know. He's got a lot of boats lying around. He probably is going to yeah, probably gonna have a makeshift boat for a bed, right? This is probably the kind of guy who doesn't, he's probably kind of obsessed with work, doesn't have a lot of time to go find furniture, especially if he's out in the woods. He's probably not. It's probably hard to get, IKEA furniture out in the middle of the woods. So you're probably just gonna have to make do with what you have, and what you have is boats. You're probably gonna have to sleep in a boat, right? And so it was just fun to kind of start to think about it that way. And so now when you go in the queue, you see, oh, when you first enter the building, there's a little boat bed up there in the top in the loft space, and things like that. And there's his drawings on the wall. And so it was just kind of fun to think that story through and start to think. And so I got to be the first one to kind of take a crack at the queue. And a lot of those ideas actually ended up transferring more or less into the final thing, which was really cool to see. I also got to kind of influence the exterior a bit because initially, when you lay out a ride, a flume track, it's a very linear kind of thing,
yeah,
right? At the water. But and so that's when the ride was laid out. It was laid out as a linear kind of waterway. Um, but when I think of all the boat houses that I've seen in pictures and things, usually the boat houses are sitting on a body of water, and there's enough of that water for the boathouse to kind of reflect off the water, right? And I was noticing in the layout of the track that there wasn't really a moment where the boathouse really got to kind of shine as sitting on the water. It sort of had a waterway coming out of it, but it wasn't quite sitting on the water yet. And I'm
yeah.
sure somebody
Got
else
the
would have,
little plume.
yeah, and I'm sure somebody else would have caught this in the process. It's no big realization on my part, but I was the one who just happened to catch it at that moment and say like, hey, like this boathouse should probably like sit on the water rather than like having a river
Yeah.
come out of it. Like, and so like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I did a little rendering showing like how the boathouse would look if we just expanded the body of water a little bit around the entrance. And so it's that kind of entry sequence when you approach the ride and you see the kind of the title, you see the sign for the ride, and you see the boathouse kind of with the queue in it kind of sitting on the water, and you see the boats coming out into the water. The fact that it's kind of sitting in the water and not just having a river come out of it, I got to kind of influence a little bit of that. And so that was kind of the fun. By no means was that ride break, was by no means does that make the ride. By no means is that the
But it
central
adds to it.
whole ride.
You
But
know,
it's
it
yeah,
helps complete a story with it from start to
yeah,
finish. And it starts with the cue. You know what I mean? It starts
yeah,
with the outside curb appeal when you're walking in that pathway.
yeah.
Because you need to get drawn in somehow to it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and so I was fortunate that there already been so much focus for that ride, and the goal of that ride was so clear, and already so much work had already been done to establish the why of why this ride exists and what its purpose is and what the focus, what's in and what's out, what it's best day ever, right? And so it was very easy for me to come in and then say, and then just kind of fill in the little holes that were left, right?
Yeah.
Those little gaps, and that's what good creative leaders do is they kind of set that tapestry and they kind of set that theme, they set that goal, and it's really clear. And so then the people below who are just kind of executing, it's very simple for us to kind of be able to fill in the gaps, and it's just very logical. It makes sense. We don't have to get too lost in the weeds of the why is this, how would I approach this problem. So
The ride's about the
it's
best
not,
day ever. I have to ask,
yeah.
was that the best project you worked on ever? Or was there a
I think of the ones that got built, of the ones I can talk about
Yeah, of course.
that got
Only
built,
the
I
ones you
would
can
say,
talk about.
yeah, I would say, yeah, I think of the ones that actually got built that I can talk about. Yeah, we got built. There's a lot of stuff that I did that's in the vault and probably will always be in the vault, that I love. But of the stuff that I got to work on that did get built, I'd probably say
Oh, nice.
that's my
Yeah, no, I
favorite.
remember
Now,
when
I haven't got the privilege of going over there yet, but I look forward to one of these days when my kids are old enough. I want to take them to Japan. I want to show them where I grew up, and I also want to show them their grandpa's the park their grandfather built, and then I want to show
Yes.
them the little parts of it that I got to touch too. And
Yeah.
hopefully my daughter will still love Tangled at that point.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to keep you that much longer, but I do want to touch upon something.
Mhm.
When since Lee Imagineering, I know you dabbled in a little bit of the book cover industry.
Yeah.
So for our viewers, we have the book Theme Park Project Management, again, written by Val Usle. Cover is done by ours truly, Sam Usle. Actually, a three-part series. I'm only on book one. I gotta make it through the first book first, but as soon as I do that, I'm on to the second and third book. After we finish, I'll probably actually go read more of the first book. But it's a fantastic book. Really great insight, written by former Imagineer of 40 years, Val Usle. Fantastic people he worked with, fantastic stories, great nitbit details that you don't find in our books. Really phenomenal. You can buy it on Amazon, and we'll actually put the link down to that page on Amazon in the description. You guys check it out. I highly recommend. It's truly fantastic. Great insight. A must read, in my opinion. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic time getting to talk with you. So insightful, so amazing. Just hearing the stories behind you as a storyteller is something that's truly great. I think it represents what we are trying to set out to do with this interview series. And hopefully this is the first of many episodes. And hopefully someday we have you back on this interview series with even more stories.
I like to talk. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
thank you so much, Ryan. This has been a lot of fun.
No, thanks so much, Sam. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here tonight at Imagineering, the stories behind the storytellers presented by Theme Park Social. Remember, follow us on our social media pages down the Theme Park Social app. My name is Ryan Pustizzi. In the words of Walt Disney, if you can dream it, you can do it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you all soon.